and welcome to the Author Roundup, a special segment of the Book Connection Show where we meet up and coming indie authors and talk to them about their recently released books. Hello, I'm Jenny, and welcome to the Author Roundup. We all want to say the right thing when someone's in pain. But what happens when our good intentions fall short? Today's episode centers on something so many of us struggle with: knowing what to say and what not to when someone is in deep emotional pain. Pastor Cheryl Bay has been in pastoral ministry for over 30 years, serving in prayer ministry, worship, teaching, preaching, prophetic ministry, and as an associate pastor. For over 2 decades, she has walked alongside those healing from deep childhood wounds, especially survivors of abuse. Her heart beats for the wounded, the voiceless, and the ones longing for freedom from pain that feels too big to carry alone. 8 years ago, Cheryl's world changed when she lost her husband. Out of that raw and life altering experience came her first book, What Not to Say: How to Walk with the Wounded, a powerful guide for anyone who wants to love better through someone's darkest hours. This book and this conversation offer heartfelt insight into walking with the grieving, with tenderness, not cliches. Let's all welcome Cheryl Bay. Hi, Pastor Cheryl. Thank you for being here.
Hello, it's good to be here. Thank you for having me.
I'm so excited to talk to you about your book. It's been out just very recently, right? So
Yes.
tell us about your book. What inspired you to write What Not to Say? Was there a specific moment that planted the seed for this book?
Well, yes, I think, 15 months before my first husband got sick, I'd had a dream, and the Lord has often spoken to me in dreams. And in this dream, it was very detailed. It was laid out in three different parts, and I'm not going to go into that now. It is in the book if you want to read it there. But I had had the dream, and at the end of the dream, on a calendar was written in red, bold, capitalized letters, underlined three times, write your book. And so I knew that the Lord was asking me to write a book, but I had no idea about what, because I thought, well, my life isn't that remarkable at this point in time, right? Like, what am I going to say? What am I going to write about? And so as time went by, and 15 months later, my first husband got sick, and shortly after that, I began to realize that, there's a reason that the Lord wanted me to write the book. And it's really just because, people say things and they don't know how to walk well with the wounded. Now, I've come up against this before when I've walked with other people who've, coming out of abuses, coming out of childhood pain, traumas and things like that. I've heard their stories and why they shut down and why they silence. And so it was those things combined, just as things were said and just as, they were said to me, my husband, my children, his parents, just realizing there's a reason we need to learn how to better walk with the wounded so that they can, feel supported during their pain.
Mhm. I see. So in your book, you share very personal and vulnerable stories, right?
Mhm.
How did you decide which parts of your own journey to include?
That's such a good question. And, I think, for me, it was just those things that just impacted me really deeply. And some of the common things that I've heard through the years that, people have said to others that are hurting deeply, and, just realizing that this isn't just me. This has happened to many people. And it's seeing the damage and, or the hurt in other people, but feeling it myself and seeing it in my kids, that made it more real. And so I think, it was those things, just some of the common things, that people go through, and things that, believers say. uh for an example, I'll say Romans 8:28, that comes up quite a bit. All things work together for good to those who love God and who are called according to his purposes. Well, that's true. And there is a time to say that, and there's a time not to say that. And that was actually said to me at the funeral. that's
Mhm.
not the time to say it, right? Like it's just not, it's not very helpful to have those things said when you're in your deepest moment of crisis. And just some other things like that, just it was just those, those most impactful moments that just kind of took my breath away. And when I heard them coming out of other people's lives who are going through the same thing, I went, these are things that need to be addressed so that we can all grow and become, the united family of God that He desires us to be.
I see. Who did you envision as your audience when you were writing this book? Were you thinking of your church members, caregivers, your friends, or any specific person?
When I started reading it, when I started writing it rather, I think, I kind of went, from my perspective, I was put into a very unique situation because I was the caregiver for my husband while he was at home. And I had to leave work fairly early in order to do that. We thought we were going to be getting a stem cell transplant. And so I had taken the time off. And the day before, the day that we were going to be leaving to go to Calgary, Alberta, from Edmonton, we got the phone call from the specialist and they said, don't come. And we can't do the transplant because these are the reasons why. And it was in that situation where I realized I have a very unique perspective on this because as the caregiver, I could see the things that were being said to me. So there is that. And there you'll find all these parts in the book, for those who want to walk in support with the wounded, right? To walk with them, to help them, uh, to be able to encourage them and how best to do that because I heard many people say to me, I don't know what to say and I don't know what to do and I feel awkward and I don't want to say the wrong thing. Or they would say the wrong thing and then they would just keep plowing forward in that wrong thing. And so I'm like, okay. So I was seeing that. I was hearing my children come to me and say things that were being said to them. And I'm like, okay. But then there was my own experiences and that of my husband as well, plus his parents, right? So I'm gathering this information and I'm going, this is something that needs to come out so that people know that they don't walk alone in this, that their pain is not unique, that when you're going through something difficult, and we will all go through something difficult, that regardless of what side of the fence you're on, whether you're the person going through it, whether you're the caregiver, the child, the parent, you're going to have some of these things said to you. But for those people as well who don't know what to say, during this time, one of my brothers actually had a friend who lost their teenage son. And he
Mhm.
called me and he said, I don't know what to do and I don't know what to say. And he goes, I'm going to the funeral. And he goes, I don't know how to handle this. And so it just all of these things together. So I would say everybody, it was the caregiver. It was, those who want to support. It was the church members, it was, anybody, because at some point in time, we're going to be in one of these situations. If you're not today, sometime in your life, you're going to find yourself in a situation where you're either wanting to support or you're the one in crisis. So it was for everybody.
I agree. It just comes with life, right? When you go through life, there will come a point, like you've said, that you would need to, you would be in that situation or you would know someone who is in that situation. And you might be faced with the problem of wanting to help, but feeling paralyzed because you don't know how to help. You don't know what to say. So, what did you hope this book would offer to people who feel helpless when someone they love is hurting?
Yeah. First of all, I think, the biggest thing is to help them understand a little bit that they aren't alone, that, regardless, like you don't know what to say. And there's so much of that. So you're not alone in this, right? Um, there's many people who are in the same situation. And it's very common, actually, for people to go, I don't know what to do and I don't know what to say. So in the book, What Not to Say, I have a lot of examples of that. You're going to find that in every chapter. You're going to find out, when we talk about everything from, the diagnosis to the death and the all of the stuff in between, about different ways that you can approach the situation. So it's just to help to give people an understanding that They don't walk alone. And here's some ideas of what you can do. Here's some ideas about what you can say. Here's how you approach it. When is the best time to try to encourage that kind of thing. So it's just really coming from that place of, you're not alone. And, there's lots of other people who've been here before you. Lots of people like this are going to be coming after you. So, yeah, so that's basically it.
And I must say that the things that you said in your book are very practical things that one can really do, very straightforward. It's very easy to relate to those suggestions that you made in the book. And in your book, you also emphasized presence over words. It's there throughout the book. Why do you think silence and presence are so powerful?
Well, when you're going, and it depends on how long you're going through something as well. I think that makes a difference, right? It depends on what your initial diagnosis is. It depends. There's a lot of variables on this, but the thing is people who are going through deep emotional pain, they need to feel supported. They need to feel loved. They need to feel seen and they need to feel heard. And it's just presence, with just being there and that silence, just to be there. Because there's so much isolation when you're in a situation like this. If you're in the hospital or if you're at home or if there's, the journey that you're going to be going through is, there's just having people come and just sit with you, just talk to you, just let you talk, tell your experiences, just let it off your chest, so to speak, right? So that you can just more readily absorb what's going on around. Because when you're told how you should be doing it, it really shuts you down. So in
Mm,
order to come and best support somebody, it's more the question, what can I do for you? What do you need? Tell me the story. How did this happen? What were the symptoms? Just so that that person has a release of conversation to be able to talk about their experience. Because that's like when somebody gets married or somebody has a baby, it's I just found out I'm going to be a grandma again last night, so that's exciting. But so the first thing we did is, we talked about how are you feeling, what's going on, all of those kinds of things, right? We don't do that when somebody is ill. Very often what we do is we want to tell them, we want to give them things, we want to give them herbal medicines, we want to do all of
right.
those things, right? So they get better, but we don't want to hear the pain. We don't want to hear because we want to make it better. So presence and silence sometimes is like, I'm going to ask you a couple of questions and then I'm just going to listen. I'm going to let you talk and you're going to tell me how you feel and how you are in this moment. And that's going to change every day. Those variables of emotions, they go up and down every day. You go to the hospital. And I'll say, for my husband, he had acute myeloid leukemia. So there was lots of trips to the hospital. We had to have blood work 3 times a week. Then there was times when we needed to have platelets or blood or whatever. Like there's this constant rotation of going to the hospital, right? And, sometimes you go and you find out, oh, he's got an infection. Now he has to be admitted. So your emotions are up and down. So presence is just like, how are you handling this? I'm just going to listen to you now. And I'm not going to tell you what I think. I'm just going to hear you because this is your experience. I think the biggest thing is it's like you're not there to fix it. You're just there to support. And the
Mm,
best way to support in a situation like this is just to hear them and let them say what's on their heart. So I hope that helps people.
yes, yes. So, Pastor Cheryl, in that situation that you presented, the person grieving was still very much open to talking about what they're going through. And, you just have to listen and be present and walk with them through their grief. How about those people who would shut off the people around them while they're grieving? There are some cases like that, right? Like they'd rather keep to themselves and not talk about stuff like that. How can we still offer support to someone who's going through that who's processing grief that way?
Hmm. Well, and again, grief is hard, right? Like it's hard. And allowing the person to go through their grief, however it is they're going to go through their grief. If they're isolating for too long, if
Mhm.
they're shutting off for too long, and what is too long? The first 3 months for me were still a matter of shock. Like I knew he was going to die, but after he died, there was still this incredible shock that he was gone. Like he
Right.
just wasn't it was just like, oh my goodness. And so it was just allowing them the time to process, and that's different for everybody, right? And as a person of faith, as a pastor, somebody who's walked through this with other people, it's still time. And so giving them just a little bit of time, and just kind of going, okay, so it's been 4 months now. You're still not really going out of the house. Can I take you out for lunch, right? Can I take you? I'm going to be going to the grocery store. Do you want to come with me? Just opening those doors a little bit so they know that they're not alone, making the phone calls or, text messages and just checking, how are you doing today? You were on my mind. I prayed for you today. Those kinds of things. So you just kind of open the door a crack so that they know if I do want to talk, I can. But really, I think when it comes to grief, very often, people who don't want to experience, don't want to look at it, want to isolate, it's, you have to follow their lead. You can't make somebody look at what they don't want to look at. The time will come, and it might be in 6 months, it might be longer than that, but they will come to a time when they will look at it. So it's just basically letting them lead.
Yeah, so you really just have to be sensitive and take the cue from them.
Hmm. Yes.
So
Yeah.
you talked about phone calls. You mentioned phone calls. You wrote about the emotional toll of constant updates and phone calls. Now, how can friends or communities help carry that burden in a more loving way?
Yeah. Well, I think, there's a few things here. The one thing that I would say to anybody is, when it comes to those phone calls and it comes to the questions that come, is if you're the person asking the person going through something that's really difficult, ask yourself, why am I asking this question? Why do I want to know the answer? Right? Because, that's big. And remember that for that person that you're connecting with, they probably have at least 10 other phone calls that they have to make, right? And so what I did is I chose a couple of core people to be my support people. And I had one for my immediate family. And my husband only had his parents and his sister. So he handled them for the most part. But, and then there's so you find one person that you talk to that can relay all the information to the other people, right?
Mhm.
So I had a couple brothers and I said, here's the information, share it, right? And I would text it out and then they would be able to just tell people or send it or however they wanted to do it. And that was really huge. That was a really big help. But then, respect the choices of the people that are going through it, right? Like, it's that is a huge thing. It's just, um, realizing that, this is about them, they're going through it, and respecting their choices, respecting their time, respecting that they might not be able to talk about it right now,
Yeah.
respecting that, the doctor might have just come in and you just got more bad news. Like there's a lot of things that we don't know when we're making those phone calls or talking to somebody on the phone. And I'll be honest, there was a lot of questions, very good questions that came from people that I talked to that I hadn't thought about asking, and neither had my husband, right? So it's good, but just know that when you ask those questions, there just might not be an answer, right? Because sometimes
Mhm.
it's not an answer. And so it's like, no, it's a good question, but there is no answer for that right now, and there might not be. So, you know, but when you're respecting their time, you can always, start by saying, hey, are you available? But when you're making the phone call, you have to determine as well, like for the caregiver or the person who is sick, considering where the person is in your circle of friends, how much information do they need to know? Do
Right.
they need to know all the dirty, nitty-gritty stuff, or can they just get a capsule size piece and then go with that, right? And determine that, like, his parents needed. Although I don't think they always wanted the nitty gritty, they needed to have the nitty gritty, right? And so, just opening that door and saying, okay, so here's where we're at. And, but people that I worked with, they didn't need to know that. They just needed to know less, right? So that helps as well.
Yes. And it's very refreshing when you said that the control of what you share is in you. So you're not burdened, you're not compelled to give all of the details to just anyone who would ask.
Hmm. And you
So,
don't need to answer the questions either, right? Like, if it's getting too personal, if it's getting too pushy, if it's getting too invasive, you can just go, I'm not prepared to answer that right now, or I can't emotionally handle that right now. You can step back. This is your story. This is your journey.
mhm,
And it's absolutely okay just to be able to say, no, I'm sorry. I'm a little overwhelmed right now with the events of the day, or maybe we could talk about this on another day. So just letting you know that just because somebody's asking you a question doesn't mean you have to answer it.
right. So we talked about the questions, like the questions that people will be asking, the phone calls and all that. There are also cases when people would be sharing the stories, the
Hmm.
comparison of experiences. Why is this so instinctive? And what's a better way to respond when that happens?
Yeah, comparison, it is, you know, it's one of those things, and we ran up against it in the beginning. We were told we're doing it so much better than these people. And then at the end, all of a sudden, when the struggle became ours, suddenly it's like, well, you're not doing it right now either, right? So I think there's a few reasons, right? Like it is very instinctive to do because, basically when we compare ourselves or we compare other people with other people, it's our insecurity that's crying out to be heard, right? And sometimes, when people are going through something, my husband was 52 when he passed away. So he was a young man. And so we had lots of friends. And, the reality is that when we have somebody in our peer group who gets ill like that with a cancer that's terminal, well, if it can happen to them, what if it happened to me? So it comes from that place as well of going, oh my goodness, right? Like, how am I going to handle that if this happens to me? And so it comes out of that place as well. And so, we had a lot of people that said, well, if it was me, I know what I would do. I would do this. And I said to them, I said, I can guarantee you one thing. I can guarantee you until that doctor sits on his chair and scooches right up to the side of the bed and leaves no space and looks in your eyes and tells you this thing, you don't know what you're going to do. It's easy to think that you know what you're going to do and you're healthy, but it's a completely different story when you're the one that hears those words. That all of a sudden takes a massive shift, right? So, comparison, another reason we do it is to kind of improve, an area in our life where we feel like we're weak. So if we feel like we're weak in the faith, right? Like we can look at somebody else and we can go, yeah, it's easy to talk from a place of faith if that's where we feel weak, right? Like, do you understand what I'm saying when I say that? So to just kind of buoy ourselves up in our faith, right, as we tell someone else to have faith. And so that's just that insecurity and that. And I think too, the other thing is it helps us process what's going on. When we look around and we see, somebody else going through something, when we make those comparisons, it was hard for people to see my husband who had been active and healthy and all of those things. And the thing is with acute myeloid leukemia, and he had a very aggressive type, it literally was he went from happy, healthy, having a great time, fun, to within a week he was fighting for his life. So it's that fast, right? So it's that helping to process, right, for yourself what just happened here, right? And so I think those are some of the reasons why we do compare and why it's so instinctive. And I think too, I do use in the book, I talk about other comparisons as well. And when it's something that we have gone through, it's like, well, when I was pregnant, because my
Right.
my daughter-in-law just got pregnant, right? Like you look at that and you go, well, when it was me, it was like this, right? And so we instinctively want to share that for whatever, as a to encourage them, or maybe not. Sometimes our stories aren't encouraging, right? We
Right.
talk about those things, but yeah. So, and I think, how could we respond in a better way? And I think this is really where supporting their decisions is really, really important. Like supporting however they choose to deal with what they're going through. And we'll take cancer as an example because that is the story of my husband. It's like, he chose to do what the doctors told him to do.
Mhm.
I had a brother that chose to follow doctor's orders explicitly. And I also knew some people who had decided to go the entire homeopathic route. Whatever they choose to do, support them.
Mhm.
I think that's the thing, right? Because it's not your journey, right? And so whatever if they've done their research, like I said in my husband's case, when he was admitted on the Saturday, he was so sick. They didn't know if he was going to make it past Wednesday. So we had 4 days, right, of processing this and going, really, he might not be here in a week, right? Like that was pretty intense. But so he didn't really have any choices, but supporting them. So instead of comparing, instead of saying, if it was me, this is what I would do, you just support them, support their decisions, and listen. Again, this is where the listening is so important. You ask the questions and then you listen, and listen to hear, not listen to respond, because that's what we do. We listen to respond. And we've already formulated the answer that we're going to say before you're finished speaking. And so it's just listen to hear, don't listen to respond. And I think, be empathetic. That's the big thing, right? Like, be empathetic, I think, is huge.
Yeah, I think it comes from good intentions most of the time,
Hmm.
but it's not. You just have to be more sensitive about what you share to the person who's going through the pain or the grief. Um, Perhaps you can share to us some of the most meaningful things that people did or didn't do in your experience or during your time of pain.
Well, I had one of our neighbors when we lived in town. One of our neighbors, that summer that he passed away, they came and they mowed our lawn. We didn't mow the lawn ever. And yet our lawn was perfectly manicured always. And it was like nobody has till this day admitted they did it. Not one of the neighbors said, yeah, it was me. I still don't know who did it. But that was so huge, right? Because that was just one thing in the busyness of the illness that we didn't have to think about. Like, when
Mm.
am I going to find time to mow the lawn? That was hugely impactful. And that was a really wonderful gesture. And so I did tell everybody in the neighborhood, well, thank you. I know one of you is lying, or maybe many of you were lying. I don't really know, but thank you for keeping my lawn perfect, right? Because my husband was the kind of guy who loved his lawn, and we had a great lawn. And so the fact that they took care of that for him made a big difference for him as well, because he felt seen and he felt heard, right? So that was really good. And I think, another thing is that I had a friend who, after he had passed away, she came and she brought this great big, box of coffee, and she poured me a cup and she poured herself a cup, and we sat at my kitchen table, and she just said, tell me about it. She goes, I've given you my afternoon. She goes, I'm not going anywhere until you're done. And so she said, just start at the beginning and tell me what happened and just talk. So we did. We sat there, we had the box of Kleenex on the table, and I talked and I cried, and she heard, and it was amazing. It was so healing for me to have somebody that wanted to hear. And I think, for my husband as well, he had an event where, what we found for him is that people were quick to come in the beginning, and they started to come again at the end. But there was that large period in between where nobody showed up. And that was really difficult for him. And because, you're just spending time with yourself and your thoughts, right? Like, what do you do? And so he had, when there was a certain individual that would come and would, she didn't know what to do. She was younger. She wasn't sure how to manage it. So she would buy little Star Wars Lego sets all the time whenever she would come. And he just so looked forward to her coming because it gave him something to do. And it was wonderful. So you don't know the little things that are going to really impact. And of course, she didn't, she just listened and loved on him, and it was, it was great. So,
Yeah, it's those experiences that would really stay in your heart, right? So, your book not only talks about your husband's death, it talks about other loss you've experienced as well. How did your experiences shape or change your view of God and prayer?
well, I've always been what would be considered a prayer warrior. I love to pray. I had When I got saved, it was just something that just really, I'm like, I love to be talking to God, right? But I think the one thing for me, there was a few things. What did it change? It's like we don't tell God what to do is the first thing, right? It's like, we don't get the option to tell God to how to do his job. That's not our place, right? And so it's asking the question, what are you saying, God, in this situation? What is your outcome? What do you want to do? I already had my outcome because he'd already given me the dream. And so, it was a bit of a challenge at times, because people would go, well, we just need to continue to pray and do this and he's going to be healed. But in my heart, I just went, I don't know if he's going to be, right? So it was really just trusting God. It really became this place of regardless of what you're going through, I just have to I just have to give it all to Jesus and I have to trust him in this. God is sovereign. He is powerful and he knows what he's doing. And I think whether we understand that or not, whether we like it or not, it comes to that place of going, if this is what God, if this is the journey that I'm on, because it is the plan of God, and I'm not saying that every time somebody gets sick, that the plan of God is that they die. I'm not saying that at all. I believe in healing. I pray for healing. I've seen people healed, right? So that's not the issue. It's more that when it's not, right? When do we stop and go, I have to trust God. So it really did. The one thing for me is that it really, really put a trust in my heart for God, for what he's doing, for what he wants to do, for what he's going to do, that he's going to do what he's going to do. And yeah, just that I think was the biggest thing.
So,
Yeah.
Pastor Cheryl, you also mentioned that you like to pray. For those people who have spiritual communities or who are part of a spiritual community, how can these communities better support those who are in pain without resorting to cliches or pressuring them to be strong?
Yeah. What I tell people now is, whenever Jesus looked at the masses, his heart was moved with compassion for their situation. And we read that repeatedly in the scripture. He looked at them and his heart was moved with compassion. And then it says he healed them or he met their need. And so looking at somebody and having compassion, that's huge. And when Lazarus died, Jesus wept. It was his friend, and he cried over it. And so I think those things are really important to remember that Jesus is a compassionate, he's loving, he's sensitive, all of those things, right? And I think too, one of the reasons I think that, again, my husband was young, but people want to fix it, and there's some things you can't fix. Trust me, I wanted to fix this. He wanted to fix it. And, but sometimes you can't fix what's in front of you. And sometimes, it's just going, I'm going to pray and but I'm not going to bring up those cliches. I'm not going to hang on to this thing or not going to pressure them, to be strong. I'm going to hear them. I'm going to support them because some days you're going to be strong and some days you're not. Some days you're going to have all the faith in the world and some days you're not. Some days you're going to have all the courage that you're going to be surprised where it came from, and other days you're going to feel like you can't scrape any up off of the bottom of the barrel, right? You're just in that situation, right? So remember, you don't need to fix it. And then, and again, asking them what they need, like, coming to them. It's so important to ask them, what do you need? If they're in the hospital, can I bring you a coffee? Can I bring you lunch? Right? Like, what is your need? Can I bring you a book? What can I do for you to support you in this situation? And then again, ask them how they're doing and listen. You let them lead the conversation. You let them lead, right? Like, don't tell, that kind of thing. So love, listen, and give them time.
Love, listen, and time. That's all very helpful to all of us. Pastor Cheryl, let's talk about your writing journey this time. How long did it take you to complete your book? And if you can tell us about some highs and lows of your writing experience, that would be great.
Well, because the Lord had spoken to me about writing this book, and as soon as I realized that it was this experience He was talking to me about, I started making notes fairly early. And, but overall, it took me about 7 years to complete it. And, it was a long journey, but very personal. And the thing is it's not just my story, right? It's not just his story. It's the story of my children. It's the story of my in-laws. And also had to wait for other people to be ready to release that. So because it's personal, but because it also extends beyond that, I needed to wait for other people to, that were close to him to get to the place where they were ready and willing to do that. So yeah, it took about 7 years. So what were some of the highs and lows? I think, as I wrote it, there was a lot of healing that happened for me. And at the end of the book, I have my sons write a little bit about their experience through it as well. And that was very healing for them. But it was really hard for me to read that. But there's a lot of healing that took place in the reading and the writing of it. And, I think anytime you write any book, and you're done and you've got it in your hand or you sent it off to the publisher and they're like, yeah, we want to publish your book, there's this sense of accomplishment, like you did this thing. This is a huge undertaking. Writing a book is not the same as writing in your journal every day. This is it's an undertaking. And so there's this massive sense of accomplishment that I got. Um, Knowing that I'd done the will of God, knowing that He had asked me to do this and that I had done it was huge. The lows, again, I think the emotional, I found it in the beginning sometimes very emotionally difficult to, look at some of these things and decide what to include and what not to include. um, Hearing other people's stories and what do I include and what do I not include? And, are you okay with the fact that I'm going to put this in my book? Those kinds of things were difficult. Um, and I think probably on the other hand of that, I would say that one of the things I found and this is anybody who's writing a book will find this. It's the writing a page and deleting a page and a half and then writing, right? Like you write a paragraph and you delete two, right? Or, you write 3 pages and then delete one page, right? So it's kind of feel in it, like, am I making any progress in this at all? Right? Like, am I getting anywhere? And, for me, I kind of felt like, is this ever going to be finished? Am I ever going to be done? Am I ever going to be at this point here right now? And then I think the other thing, fear that people are going to hate it, right? Like, that sense, right? Like, are people going to find it helpful, right? So, yeah.
Yeah, so you mentioned it already. Like it's not easy to write a book. So you write a paragraph and you delete a page and a half and all that. So knowing all the difficulties or the challenges of writing a book, what advice can you give to someone who's working on their first book?
First thing I did is I made a storyboard, right? Like, what do I want included in it? And then I just put little jot notes under that. And I kept it on my desk. And then when I would sit down to write it, I would have that. I didn't necessarily write page chapter one, two, three. I went page one, chapter one, chapter 12, right? Like I jumped around. But when you've got the storyboard, that it helps you get it on paper and it helps you see the holes that you might have. So I would definitely, I would say that, make the storyboard and then, just get started. It's easy to postpone. It's easy to, not do anything with it. You've got an idea. Lots of people want to write a book, but, you need to get started. So what I did too is that I have a brother. He's not a Christian, but he also wrote a book. And so we would hold each other accountable to how many words did you write this week? Did
Mhm.
you write this week? Why didn't you write this week, right? And so that was really super helpful, right? To be able to have other people in your circle who get the process. He goes, yeah, he would sometimes say, yeah, I wrote 4 pages today and then I didn't save them, right? And so, but you understand the whole process, right? So, and then the other thing too is celebrating every victory. I started, celebrate. I wrote a chapter, celebrate, right? Like, just in every little thing, there's a celebration, that encourage yourself to keep going. And then, especially when you get to the finish line, even with the edits, I found the edits probably one of the most difficult things because it's like, oh, right? It was difficult to go through. But when you're done the edits, you celebrate, right? So it's, keeping yourself, you know, moving forward in that. So that would be my encouragement there. So get started, make your storyboard and get started. Yeah.
Yeah, those are good suggestions to stay motivated. So
Mhm.
now that the book has been out, a lot of people have started to read it. Can you tell us about the feedback that you're getting from your readers and what has been the most meaningful to you?
Well, I have to be honest and say, I haven't had any bad feedback yet. Like, I haven't had anybody tell me that the book was not helpful. So basically, people have said, it's timely and it's needed, right? I've had a lot of people who've said, yeah, I've gone through something similar, or my mom passed away, or my dad, or whatever. And they go, I relate because some of those things were said to me as well. And just the things that you said were helpful. Um, you know, uh, it's powerful, it's moving, right? Like I've had that said. It's relatable, right? And I think, I had one person said you covered a lot and you covered it very well. You addressed it really well. And, one person who said, I've never been in your situation before in any of these people, but she goes, it gave me a lot to think about as, for what she knows is going to happen at some point, right? She goes, it gave me a lot to think about. And I'll definitely be, revisiting the book when that time comes. So, yeah. So that's been it's been good feedback so far, which I'm really appreciative of. I'm sure that that's not going to be the case every time, but I'm welcoming all the positive feedback right now. So, yeah.
It felt amazing to hear all those feedback from your readers and to know that your book resonates with them and has that impact because that's the goal, right? To help those who will be reading your book. Pastor Cheryl, would there be other books or companion resources that you're considering creating or writing in the future?
Well, when I first started to write the book, what I had initially wanted to do is I wanted to have a booklet, which I haven't done anything with, like a booklet of just some of the little pin points in the book, right? Like instead of reading the whole book, you've got just this little
Mhm.
booklet. Haven't done anything with that. But that was a thought that I had. And of course, now that I've written my first book, right, it's kind of like, yeah, there's other books in me, right? Like I definitely could, and other people who have read the book have said, maybe you could write a book on infertility, what not to say to those who struggle with fertility
Mhm.
or, and I'm like, yeah, that's a big one. And, I've had, a veteran who came to me and he said, maybe you could write a book about what not to say to veterans. And I'm like, oh, well, I would definitely need your help on that one. But yeah, so I don't know that I would do another series on this, but I do think, there's other things that I definitely would like to talk about. And so we'll just see where it goes. There's definitely books inside of me, and we'll see where it goes.
Looking forward to all of those. For this particular book, What Not to Say, How to Walk with the Wounded, what are your goals for this book in this year?
I think as any author, you want to do well, right? You want to sell lots of copies. You want people to buy your and enjoy it and have other people buy it. And I want people to get it in their hands. Honestly, I feel like this is the kind of book that I would love to have in every hospital gift shop, in every unit that is a hospice center,
Mhm.
and in churches, right? Because I think in churches, I think the struggle with the church is and this sounds odd to say, but it's the faith issue, right? Like because if faith can't Jesus had compassion when he looked on the people, right? And so that there's that, in churches for people to know when they've had loss, they, not to come at them with faith, you know, because one of the things that was very often said was, well, he'll be in heaven, that's got to help. Well, he's not here, though. Good for him. I'm glad that he's in heaven, but I want him here. My kids want him here. His parents want him here. His sister wants him here. And so it's in those situations you're like, it does. I mean, I'm glad it is. I'm glad that I'm going to see him again one day, but I want him here, right? And so I think it would be that's where I'd love to see it is in I'd love to have it in churches. I'd love to have it hospital gift shops, hospice centers, any of those places, right?
That would be so helpful. If someone is listening today and they want to become a better support to the wounded, what's one simple but powerful thing that they can start doing?
Show up for them. That's the one thing. Show up for them, hear them,
Mhm.
listen to them, and then do whatever you can to help them, right? That would be the biggest things, right?
Mhm.
Help, hear, and do.
Is there anything else that you would like to share to everyone tuned in about your book?
Well, I would like to talk a little bit about anticipatory grief, and I might even read a chapter or two from the book on that. But, anticipatory grief is one area where people also, they would go, well, you knew that this was going to happen. So somehow that's supposed to make the pain not be there. Like you knew he was going to die. But there's a very distinct difference between knowing that somebody's going to die and actually having them die. They're not the same thing. And so you can do a little bit of grieving beforehand, but the grief will still be there after they're gone. And I am going to read that little bit on anticipatory grief. So on page 125, it says, I want to share a brief segment on anticipatory grief from my personal perspective. When others would mention that I knew he was going to die, the insinuation was that my grief should be lessened because I knew it was coming. But there is a huge difference between grief and anticipatory grief, or the anticipation and knowledge that someone will die. Anticipatory grief is the time when the heart and emotions of those facing a loss begin to prepare for the imminent grief that they will unfortunately have to experience. As a side note, this doesn't only include the losses of people you love, although it often does. It can also include any other massive life shift, including the final signing of the divorce documents or the end of a career. Anticipating the loss of a loved one whose prognosis is terminal is not the same as having lost them. Nothing can prepare you for that. Anticipatory grief happens much more in the mind than in the heart as you consider what your life will be like without the one you love. It is difficult as you watch them deteriorate and weaken, but you also know it is part of the process. During the waning process, you will expect death and therefore grieve before their end because you are waiting for the day to come. So I think that's all I'll read there.
Yeah, that's really something to think about. You're right. Like when you already saw it coming, people would think that you've already prepared for it. And there's higher expectation on how you will be handling the grief, right? But it's a good thing that you mentioned that because I think everyone should be aware that it's different, right? It's not going to lessen the pain, it's not going to make it better. It would even prepare you for the grief that would be coming. So yeah, I think
Yeah.
that would be very helpful to everyone who would be reading your book. So finally, Pastor Cheryl, please invite everyone tuned in to visit your website, follow you in social media, and of course get a copy of your book.
Okay, so my book, What Not to Say,
Mhm.
this is my book. And you can also purchase the book on Amazon. It's available now. You can go there, you can check it out, buy a copy, and you'll be able to buy it in stores where books are sold as well. So I'm excited. I'm excited to see what the future holds and what God is going to do with this. He told me to write it, so it's in his hands, I guess.
Yes, a big thank you to Pastor Cheryl Bay for being here and sharing from such a tender, honest place. Her book is more than a guide, it's a gift to both the grieving and those who love them. So, whether you're navigating your own loss or trying to support someone through theirs, Cheryl's words offer clarity, compassion, and care. You can find Cheryl Bay's book, What Not to Say How to Walk with the Wounded, at Amazon.com, barnesandnoble.com, Westbow Press online bookstore, and other resellers. It's available in hardcover, softcover, and ebook formats. I encourage you to pick up a copy, reflect, and share it with someone who may need it. So thank you so much for tuning in to the Author Roundup. See you in the next episode.